I called probably every single person I knew in the healthcare supply chain industry. We hate back orders and we hate these issues. I knew there was something there, but are they willing to pay to solve it?
Hello, this is the Little Pursuits podcast, where we have conversations with founders and builders creating something they believe in. I'm your host, Patel, an executive coach for founders. Today, I'm joined by Kerin. She's the founder and CEO of efficientSC, a Techstar-backed company that is on a mission to cut the billions lost in supply chain disruptions and burnout in hospital supply chains. Let's get into it. Hi, Sarah. Thank you so much for joining me today.
Excited to be here. Thanks for having me.
Of course. So to kick off our podcast, I usually ask our guests, what were some of the things you were interested in starting off? So even before maybe you got to college, this just helps to kind of connect the dots and tell your story. So, to start with, what were some of the interests that you had in exploring, whether in high school or even further back?
Yeah, I think as a kid, I was a total science nerd. I loved science. I loved chemistry, biology. I participated in the New Jersey Science Fair. And so I always, had a passion and love for science. And when I was thinking about, my career paths as a kid, I was thinking I was going to become a doctor. And that was the path that I wanted to go on, and very quickly realized I hated needles and I hated blood. And I was like, I am not going to last a day as a doctor. So I started to think about like other, career paths as I was going to college, and took a practical route and became a business major. So I went to college, Tulane University. So graduated from the business school. And after college, I got a job at a small jewelry manufacturer. So learned, working a small business, understanding operations, purchasing, sales, marketing, a little bit of everything. And I kind of learned very quickly that I liked the operations side a little bit more than the sales side at that point in my career. And so after that, I moved to Chicago and worked at the University of Chicago Medicine in their supply chain department. So that was my first kind of experience within the supply chain world, and learned operations and supply chain from working in a large academic medical center. And I loved it. I was super passionate about kind of getting back to those science roots. I was working very closely with surgeons and doctors and learning about new products and new technology that were coming to the marketplace, understanding how those worked clinically, and then also taking my business knowledge and understanding what was the financial impact of bringing in new medical devices, and how that could kind of impact the organization financially if we were making that switch. And so that part of my journey was managing like the value analysis within their supply chain department. So I loved kind of having those two parts of it. And that was kind of my first jump into supply chain.
Yeah. I actually didn't know you wanted to be a doctor at some point. So that's really fun to learn. And I can relate. I also am not a fan of needles and blood and, that aspect of things. So I too would not last in that setting. No, but it sounds like with supply chain and, working in like a healthcare kind of setting, you kind of married the two things that you did find interest in, which was like science and supply chain. So what did you learn during that time because I also saw that you rised really quickly in your career, right? So what was it that you were learning, and what helped you to kind of accelerate your career growth in this time?
Yeah, that role at U Chicago Medicine, blending kind of the science and the business side, I did not like seek that out, and it kind of just happened that way. And I think I, loved the role so much because of that. So I think that was a really awesome experience. I think my career took off pretty quickly. I was pursuing my MBA part-time. So I was learning at the same time as I was working full-time, and having that like experience of trying to like hone in on your communication skills, build leadership skills, I think was really important. I was able to really take what I learned in my MBA and put it into action very quickly into my role. And I loved, the team that I worked with. I loved the exposure I had across the organization, working with senior leadership. And my managers at the time were super supportive of my career journey and gave me tremendous opportunities to present in front of senior leadership many times. And I think that that was something that I didn't know at the time how truly important and valuable that was. I just thought it was kind of cool to be able to give a presentation at the steering committee meetings, but really was an important part of my journey to develop my skill sets.
Yeah, absolutely. What led you to pursue your MBA?
So I knew I wanted to get a higher degree. Kind of always, it was in the back of my mind. But when got the job at University of Chicago Medicine, one of the benefits was tuition benefit at the University of Chicago Booth
Mm,
School of Business. And so I think I, jumped right into that. Maybe I would have waited a little bit later had I not had that specific role. But I like really, I knew I kind of always wanted to get a secondary degree. I didn't know what point in my career. And so that was actually a key reason why I went part-time was I started pretty early on in my career. And so I
mm,
didn't want to finish my MBA and have just a few years of work experience. I wanted to work during that time and be able to, like I said earlier, like kind of take the things I was learning and put it into practice very quickly. And I think that was also something looking back that was super valuable. I didn't realize at the time. At the time, I was just thinking about how chaotic my day was, waking up, working out, going to the office, coming home, going to class. And yeah, I don't know how I did it.
yeah, yeah. I was gonna ask, how did you do that? I'm sure that was a lot at the time, and yeah, that's an amazing benefit, by the way, that I think a lot of people probably don't have is like tuition being covered as part of your work benefit. And I'm glad you took advantage of that at that
Yeah,
time.
it wasn't fully covered, but
What?
partially.
Yeah, partially. I'm sure that helps
Definitely
a
still
lot
worth
as
it.
well. Yeah. So, what was your biggest takeaway from your MBA degree that still kind of stays with you till this day?
I think one of the things we learn a lot in at Booth was there was very a big focus on like self-awareness and becoming very self-aware of your like surroundings, your career, and how you present yourself in meetings. I think also thinking strategically. So at school, we learned kind of how to think, not really like what to think about specifically, because obviously that can change whatever environment, whatever problem you're in. So trying to think about things strategically, I think was one of my biggest takeaways, and really being data driven. I think the Booth School of Business is very focused on data and metrics and analytics. And I think having that skill set on like, especially on the financial side as well, I learned a ton getting my finance concentration because being in operations, I didn't have that skill set. So I loved that. I think honing in on those soft skills, your self awareness, your leadership skills was very important.
Yeah, thank you for sharing that. No, I think all those things that you mentioned are definitely important. And as you mentioned, like to be able to think strategically, regardless of what your role is, that's like invaluable in honing those skills during that time, I'm sure contributed to all the career progress you also made during and after. So after you finished your MBA, when did you know it was the right time to maybe go to your next job opportunity, or like did you seek it out, or what led you to that next step?
Yeah, so I loved my job at U Chicago so much. I was not looking. I was, planning to stay. I really loved the team. I had built my own team that was incredible. And so I was not looking, but I got approached by a recruiter to work at Apple. And, I like everyone I talked to was like, you can't turn that down. And I was like, well, I definitely weighed the possibilities. But I think,
Yeah.
I eventually took the job at Apple, and it was an incredible, invaluable experience to be able to kind of step outside of healthcare, learn supply
Mhm.
chain from one of the biggest supply chains in the world, and understand how they, work and operate. And then actually, then I came back to the healthcare industry, so I kind of took that knowledge with me.
Yeah. What was it like working in tech, and from a supply chain perspective, how was it different from healthcare?
Yeah. So in healthcare, I was managing, I was strategic sourcing and procurement functions. So I was managing and negotiating with vendors on finished goods and actually like 510K regulatory approved products. But at
Mhm,
Apple, you're working on the manufacturing side. So it's definitely a little bit more manufacturing heavy where we were working with
mhm,
vendors internationally and, understanding the product lines, standing up a capital equipment line, labor associated with manufacturing.
mhm,
So very deep in the manufacturing side of supply chain, which I
mhm,
was really fortunate and excited to have that experience. I was actually talking to a colleague earlier this morning from Apple. And so we were talking about how it was really like a hands-on manufacturing heavy kind of role, and understanding that
mhm,
I think was super valuable coming back into the healthcare industry where you don't necessarily see that far upstream in the supply chain. So
mm.
knowing kind of how that works, I think is really helpful and has made me better in the roles.
Yeah, it sounds like this gave you kind of like that fuller picture of the supply chain side
Definitely,
of
yeah.
things. Yeah. So after Apple, you had, I think, one more role before you started your company. What was that pivot, and what led you to kind of go that
Yeah,
direction?
so I joined Kindbody right after they had just raised their Series C. So I was brought on as the director of procurement to centralize kind of procurement and supply chain operations. That was an incredible experience. That was my first taste of the startup life. So learning kind of what it's like to be in a very fast moving startup culture. Because previously I was at like obviously Apple, large, huge organization, U Chicago, big, large academic medical center, and then prior to that, small business. So this was definitely
Mhm,
like a different experience, kind of rounded out. And learning a little bit more about startups. I'd always had this kind of passion and thinking about wanting to start my own company. So while I was at Booth, I had like dabbled with a couple things here and there and just put it on the side because it wasn't the
mhm.
right time. But this was working at KindBuddy kind of gave me my entrepreneurial side of things and kind of pushed me to take the leap.
Amazing. Um, so now you're at Kindbody. What is kind of the trigger that led you to say, okay, I'm ready to start my own company? What was that
Yeah,
experience?
I think just being able to see, what a startup culture looked like, I think was probably the first, signal for that of like, this is very fast paced. We can move and iterate and change things very quickly and try things and break things and change things. And I loved being able to do that. And I was back in the healthcare side and I was still dealing with products. So one of my biggest challenges at U Chicago was dealing with products that were on back order. So items that you couldn't get in for whatever reason because of shortages or just shipping delays. And so when I went to Apple, we didn't have much of that because we had really end-to-end visibility on the supply chain, and any issues we had didn't really get that far along. But then coming back to healthcare a couple years later, no, seeing that not much had changed. We were still dealing with all these back orders and issues. I really wanted to make a difference there and kind of change the way that we were approaching that problem on the provider side. So that was
Mhm.
my first, just dealing with those frustrations day to day. Really took the leap.
Okay. So, as you're exploring how to solve this problem, what helped you to make progress on like maybe that first prototype, or just kind of solutioning a little bit to, okay, maybe this is what the solution could look like? What were some of those
Yeah, I
things?
think so. I called probably every single person I knew in the healthcare supply chain industry, like friends of friends, colleagues, etc., and just asked like, is this a problem you guys are dealing with, or is this just something unique that I had been dealing with? And with the resounding like, ugh, like, yes, we hate back orders and we hate these issues. I knew there was something there. So I didn't know exactly like what we were gonna solve. But I think hearing that the problem existed over and over again, I think helped me realize this was a space that needed innovation.
I think that's a really great point. And this is something I talk to founders about all the time, is just honing in on what is the problem you're solving and talking to enough people who say, yes, this is a problem and I'm willing to pay to get this problem
Yeah.
solved. So it sounds like you started at the very start, which is instead of solutioning, you're like, let me
Yeah,
validate
I
that this is
think
a
I
problem.
talk to a lot of founders who have different ideas that are great ideas. But then when they start, actually like asking, like, "Oh, who did you talk to? How many people have you talked to?" And it's like
Yeah,
one or two, and you really
right.
need to like talk to a lot of people just to really understand. And to your point too, like they may still believe this is a problem that they face, and they may validate that this is a
Mhm.
problem, but are they willing to pay to solve it? Is another like step further to make sure like, that is being covered in the
Right.
validation.
Yeah. Because I think all those early conversations will help you to understand, like, no, this is critical and people will pay for this once I have a solution,
Mhm.
right? Because ultimately that's the goal is you'll have revenue one day,
Yeah,
right? So you want to kind of lead with that. It's like, well, are you going to pay if someone solves this
totally.
problem, right? Yeah. So any early like advisors or resources that kind of helped you as you're kind of thinking through, okay, you're having these conversations and then you're thinking through the solution. What were some things that helped you to kind of get to that next point of like, okay, I kind of can start outlining what the solution could look like?
So I think early on, it's really important to talk to other founders who've done something similar in your space, if ideally. Like, that would be great to
Yeah.
find people who've built in your space before, because they will be honest about the challenges that you're going to face. And I think
Mhm.
it's really important as you start as an entrepreneur, knowing that this journey is long and hard and very challenging. And so I feel like getting that feedback up front is definitely helpful. And if you still feel motivated after that, that's great. And then these people can
Yeah.
be your like circle of trust. They can be part of your personal board of advisors, potentially formal advisors for your company, but they also just know they've been there. And I
Mhm.
think one thing I'll add to is finding someone who's not too far along in their journey, right? Like you finding someone who
Mhm.
exited this space maybe 10 years ago is not going to be the same type of challenges that you're facing as
Right.
you're building. So it's silly because I think some people who are, maybe 1 year in or 2 years in don't think they can offer much advice to people who are starting, but you absolutely can.
Mhm.
And it's very important too, because I think you're recent enough to give the advice, but a little bit further along
Yeah.
to kind of see it from a higher level.
Yeah, I think that's really great feedback for founders because that peer community that you create with other founders who are also building um, can help you to kind of like as you face challenges too to kind of say, okay, I'm not insane. This is this is a
Yeah,
challenge, right? It and other people are also facing it and
totally.
they've overcome it. So I also know I can work through it. So I think that's
Yeah, that
great
first
that you,
year, I
yeah.
joined like every circle, every founder group, every kind of thing that was free. Like, and in the New York
Yeah.
area, there's a lot of that. So I did that just for that exact purpose, to talk to other people who are going through it as well. Living in this area, knowing, how expensive it is to live here, and making that same crazy decision to leave a six-figure job and how to navigate all those challenges, I think it's really important to find people like who understand.
Yeah, yeah. And it's a big decision to give up everything that's already working for you,
Totally.
right? Like your career was going amazingly well, right? So to decide then, like, okay, I'm gonna leave that behind and just go try something, I think is a huge step. So, what helped you to make that decision? Were there certain indicators you were looking for that kind of said, okay, this is the time now? I feel like I can take this leap.
There were definitely like some personal factors I feel like in my life that made that decision easier to say, okay, this is kind of the time. I was like little bit later in my 20s and, didn't have kids yet. So just, trying to think about those factors, especially as a female founder, is definitely real. But I think, having the support of my husband has been incredible. And just, we talked a lot before I made the decision about like what this means, how this will change our lives in the short term, in the longer term, in the really long term. And
Yeah.
so, I think, having that support like group is really important. Obviously, I'm very fortunate and very thankful for my husband and my family who have like, constantly given me emotional support through the journey.
Yeah, absolutely. I think yeah, founders who are maybe earlier in their career, where they don't maybe have that kind of established partnership, it's easier like to kind of just look at yourself and go, okay, can I take this leap? And it's mostly just kind of about you. But yeah, of course, if you're in this partnership or other people kind of are also involved in your life, it's always great to talk it out and make sure
Totally.
that's the right decision for you as a team, right?
Totally.
And
And
not
it's
just
not
for you
even just,
personally.
it's not even like it's a huge financial decision, obviously, but it's a big
Yes.
emotional decision too. It's a
Yeah.
big journey you go through as a founder that you need to kind of lay it out on the table and just clear that this
Yeah.
is going to be very hard and we need to, work through this.
Yeah, yeah, absolutely. So, okay, so you made the decision. You have your husband on board. Um, what is the next step? Like, when did you decide? Like, okay, I'm putting in my notice. What were the first things you started working on?
Yeah, so I think, I circled back to all of those people that I called initially and really tried to I mocked up some prototypes, very like, rough things to say, "Hey, so you know that thing we talked about a couple months ago, is this what you were thinking? Would you pay for
Hmm.
this? How much would you pay for this too?" Because that was important. Like if it was like not a lot, then like maybe that was
Right.
not the exact problem that we needed to be solving. And so
Hmm.
I think that was like our first step, or my first step was just like coming back to all those people and trying to test the theory a little bit further and go a little bit deeper than just
Hmm.
like initial conversations.
Yeah. How did those conversations go for you? Like, obviously, since you kept going, a lot of people probably said all the things you wanted
Yeah.
to hear. But did you hear anything in that feedback that like surprised you and that kind of informed the solution that you were kind of thinking of?
Yeah, so I think that pricing like conversation, asking like how much you'd be willing to pay for this, and when I was hearing,
Hmm.
low dollar amounts, I kind of had to
Hmm.
parse through those signals of like, does that really mean that this is not a big problem to solve? Or does that mean this is
Hmm.
something they are willing to invest a small amount because it solves a small
Hmm.
problem and we could potentially grow from there? And so trying to
Yeah.
learn how to navigate the feedback. Also, as I
Hmm.
mentioned, a lot of these people were like friends and colleagues. And so
Hmm.
I had to parse through a lot of that feedback where people, I think, didn't want to break some hard news to me.
Yeah.
And so like understanding that like willingness to pay and clearly like defining who would be a potential customer versus who would not be interested in it.
Yeah, yeah. I think it's always great to get feedback from anyone, but yeah, you do have to keep those relationships in mind. And as much as you can to kind of step out of that circle to say, okay, people who don't know me, what are they
Totally.
saying? Are they saying something different from the people who do know me? Because I think that can also be an indicator of, people, yeah, like you said, not wanting to break your
Yeah.
heart and the idea you might have. So then, what was the next step? So you got all this feedback. People are like, yes, I'll pay maybe a small amount. And you're like, okay, how can I give them something? They're like, I will pay anything you want for this solution. What took you to there?
Yeah. So it was a big journey. Like it's hard to like look back. There was so many twists and turns. I think my one of my probably biggest challenges was I non-technical. I didn't have a software
Yeah.
background. I did not have like an engineering background. So
Hmm.
trying to figure out what's this correct support model for building the company and went through a
Mm.
lot of different failed learnings, I'll say,
Yeah.
to get there. And so I think that was important for my journey because, it built my confidence. It helped me with all those, failed outcomes. I learned a ton
Mhm.
about how to actually like what actually goes into coding and building software and all of the infrastructure around it, which I think in
Mhm.
the end makes me a better founder CEO of a technology company.
Mhm.
So I will say like everything has its silver lining and kind of
Yes.
is your kind of learning from that point.
Yeah, absolutely. And um, I think it's great that you're calling out, like, yeah, I'm not a technical founder, but you also did not let that stop you from, going in and saying, well, let me go figure out what I
Mhm.
can, right? Um, and what would you say was like your biggest takeaway from some of those initial experiences that maybe other founders can take away as a lesson
Yeah,
from your
I
efforts?
think, well, when I first started, I was like, I have no idea what it takes to build software. And I feel like you know more than you think. Like, if you're tech savvy
Mhm.
enough, you can understand product and user experience and like how to interact with a platform, which is a really big part of building a product. There is obviously the back end
Mhm.
coding that is important as well, but there is a lot of front end like UX UI work that is important.
Mhm.
And I think I didn't think I was strong enough in that area when I actually was. And I feel like that was probably my biggest takeaway was like I had this like big fear and like thought this was like kind of a black hole and I would never be able to master it. But then when I was kind of forced to in some of those situations, I was like, "Oh, okay, I can kind of figure this out." And I'm by no means an
Mhm.
expert, but like at least I am enough
Mhm.
to be dangerous. And I've had some incredible advisors along the way who've like really, really dumbed things down for me to help me understand. And also ChatGPT is awesome as well.
Yeah, yeah, absolutely. I mean, there's so much you can do now. Kind of, you can get pretty far on your own,
Definitely.
uh, but definitely like bringing in advisors and experts who can kind of double check for you, like, hey, is this the right direction, or how would you think about this? It is definitely super helpful
Yeah.
too. Uh, and so you realize that's like your strength coming in. So I'm assuming you brought on a team or some people to help you on the technical side of things. What was that process like for you? Not having a technical background, how did you vet the people you brought in to help you?
Yeah. So, like I said, I had a very strong advisor who was a friend from business school, and
Mhm.
he helped me for like almost a year prior to like determining that we needed a CTO
Mhm.
to come on board. And he actually then became the CTO. So I think that's
Oh,
very
great.
fortunate and like very exciting that that all worked out that way. But I also think it is a testament to show like we took the time to build a relationship and like grew together through this process.
Mhm.
And then it made sense when it made sense. And I think
Mhm.
it's really hard to like just interview someone and find someone. I think the earlier you are, it has to be kind of in your circle of trust or within like, a close tier around it. And I remember people would tell me that and I'd be like, "Well, I don't know anyone," or like, "This is not my network really." But you
Mhm.
can probably find someone if you, kind of talk to someone
Yeah.
who knows someone who knows someone. I think that that would probably be my advice or best way to kind of navigate that.
No, thank you for sharing that. I think this is something we talk about a lot in co-founder, like bringing in a co-founder. But whether it's just a CTO or a co-founder, whoever you bring in as that technical lead is going to have a huge influence, right?
Absolutely.
So you do want to make sure that's a person you trust and, like you said, built a relationship over time to make sure that your working dynamics kind of make sense.
Definitely.
Yeah.
It just gets harder, right? Like in the beginning, it's kind of easy. Like right when you first start out,
Yeah.
everyone's happy you're in this like honeymooning phase, but it really is. It
Yeah.
takes work. It's a long term relationship that you really have to put
Mhm.
into. I mean, people compare it to a marriage, and so just trying to make
Yeah.
sure you vet and you date and you figure it out, and then you figure out how to navigate conflict together and how do you overcome challenges and It is true.
Yeah, 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 definitely. And I guess to that point, what are some things that have helped you to navigate that relationship? And also, like maybe when you don't see eye to eye, right? Like, what are some things that have helped you both to kind of say, okay, this is how we're going to move
Yeah,
forward?
I think it comes down to the relationship that you have and how you navigate conflict or difficulty with each other. Truly, like we have a really strong mutual respect for each other, and we know our weaknesses and we know where our boundaries are, and I'm very quick to say, hey, you take the lead on this. I don't know much more, but I also challenge some of his thinking and he challenges some of mine, even though he's not an
Hmm.
expert in this space either. So it's
Hmm.
it's you have to find some sort of balance and a really good relationship to work through, because you need to come out at the end better off. There's so much other stuff that's going on that's hard and
Hmm.
difficult that like that can't be
Yeah.
the most difficult thing that's going on.
Yeah, absolutely. And it derails a lot of
Totally.
startups. I think the conflict you have within your starting team. So yeah, so I think what you said, like someone you respect and you trust their opinion or their kind of take on how to move forward is probably really, really important. So you don't have to question everything they're doing, and they don't have to question everything you're
Yeah,
doing.
and like have the humility to like know what you don't know.
Oh yeah, yeah, for sure. So I know recently you also went through Techstars Accelerator program. So maybe you can walk us through how you approached that opportunity. Were you invited to join, or did you apply? What were some of the contexts maybe that helped you to get into the accelerator? Because I know a lot of founders are also interested in exploring accelerators.
Yeah, so the Techstars program that I did was partnered with Northwestern Medicine, and so they were an investor with Techstars together. And I had known the supply chain team at Northwestern Medicine, and so as I was thinking about the opportunity, had connected with them, and so I love that team there, and that has been a beautiful, great relationship together. And so the program was earlier this year and has been we've hit tremendous momentum post program, which has been really exciting to see. I would say the Techstars Accelerator program was very beneficial to, you know, how to build a business, how to think about the longer term, how to kind of get your ducks in a row to be a better founder. And I think at the end of the program, I definitely came out a better founder and have, yeah, like I said, hit a lot of momentum this year, which has been really exciting.
Amazing. What was that? I guess application process like? You just were referred from the team that was already there, or did you apply and go through like an interview process? Just
Yes, there
so
was an interview
people who are
process.
interested, yeah,
Yep, there was an application and an interview process, and yeah, I don't know. I can't share
yeah,
much more.
okay,
Yeah.
no, no, yeah, yeah. No. I was just wondering, did anything help you prepare for those things, or because I think a lot of the questions are about your business, but during the interview, what did you think they were kind of like looking for that really helped you to get into the
Yeah, I
program?
think for us specifically, I think I have a really strong founder match for the industry. I have expertise in the industry, and I've become a founder and trying to solve the same problem that I dealt with as an operator. And I think that was interesting and critical. And knowing what it's like to work in an academic medical center or work in a health system, I think helped me
Mhm.
tremendously understand how do you sell into a health system, right? There's a lot of processes, there's a
Mhm.
lot of team consensus building, and there's a lot of different teams that need to be involved for the purchasing process. There's procurement, there's
Mhm.
IT, there's risk, there's legal, and all of navigating all of that, I think, is really critical. And having a founder who knows how to sell is super like important for, I think, from an investor's perspective.
Right. Yeah, exactly. I think the one of the things, one of the questions is why you, right? Like, why are you the right person to solve this problem? It sounds like you were the perfect fit for that
I guess so.
profile. Yeah, great. And what was like? one key takeaway from that accelerator that you've applied post accelerator as well that has really helped to accelerate things for you?
One of the things that they really focus on in the program is mentorship and finding mentors that will help you along this journey, and different types of mentors, right? Like different people maybe
Hmm.
who worked in this industry before, maybe people who have been a founder before, people who are investors, and knowing like what you need at that time. I think that was a key focus of the program, which I've learned. And one of the also the other things that they teach you is like you're going to get a lot of feedback and you're going to get a lot of advice,
Hmm.
and how to like parse through it and understand different people's biases, and also like don't get overwhelmed by all of the kind of information that's coming at you. So I think that was
Yeah.
critical, and also just maintaining those mentor relationships. Like I still, talk to my mentors on a regular basis, and they've continued to help me post program and just have like incredible insight that might help you if you have a blind side or something like that, to kind of uncover something to help you as a founder.
Yeah, absolutely. What I'm noticing as you share your story is you really leverage your network really well. You're reaching out to people and just kind of having conversations to better understand their experience, and it sounds like you really use that to help you build the business that you have
Absolutely.
today.
I definitely have. Being a solo founder is really hard. And so I definitely had to lean on that, for both emotional and
Yeah.
tactical advice.
Yeah, I just wanted to call that out because often it feels like we need to figure everything out on our own, or we shouldn't share too much or whatever, right? Like go outside of ourself. But what I'm noticing with a lot of successful founders is they actually do talk to a lot of people to get kind of just information, like what I'm thinking of, like, is it lining up
Mhm.
with the actual problem, or is it lining up with the industry and what, mentors and experts and advisors are seeing, and then
Totally.
kind of revising what you're doing based off of that, or saying, okay, I'm going to keep going. This is
Yeah,
validated.
yeah. But honestly, sometimes
Yeah.
those are the calls too. Like, with my mentors, they're like, "Yep, that's how I do it." And I'm like, "Okay, good." Like, just needed to talk it out. And
Yeah. That's great. So, how did you approach potential clients? So once you kind of have, let's say, a solution in mind, you're already maybe building it, and you start reaching out to customers, potential customers. How were those conversations? How did they evolve? And what is kind of your feedback or takeaway from what you've learned having sales conversations? Because I know you also come from operation side, so
yes.
maybe sales is like a different muscle now that you're
Definitely.
honing.
Yeah, it definitely is. I think learning your, customer really well is super important. Understanding like what they think about when they are, coming into work that day. What are the jobs that they need to do? What are the challenges that they're facing?
Mhm.
So that when you either send that email or you chat with them in some other way, like you're resonating with them, like you're talking their language, you're using the same kind of words that they're using. I think a lot of
Mhm.
that comes from my experience working in the industry. Like I can kind of talk the lingo or the like short form of different specific problems that are being faced.
Mhm.
So I think that's definitely one. Also in the healthcare industry, conferences are just like a big thing. So that's definitely another way to get in front of people and try and like attend sessions and meet people in the networking events, and again, yeah, talk the talk of like what they're working through and their challenges. And I think it gets a little easier when you get a little closer to product market fit, right? When you like are starting to
Mhm.
see that this message is resonating or this challenge is something they do want to solve and they're willing to pay, you
Mhm.
it gets easier. You don't It's not so
Yeah.
like hard to have those conversations.
Yeah, it's not as
Right.
theoretical anymore, right? Yeah. And I'm sure the more of those conversations you had, the easier it was also to hone in on the things that would resonate with someone new you talk to,
Definitely.
because you've gone through so many conversations. So I think that repetition is probably very
Yeah.
important. And as your product is kind of getting closer and closer to a solution that is, kind of working or is going to work, probably the confidence also kind of starts to come in and help a little bit. So all of those things kind of come together at some
Yep,
point.
and then the referral network is big network effect too, right? Like as
Yeah.
bring on different customers and they love your product, they're going to quickly refer you to your next set of customers, which is incredible, especially in this healthcare supply chain
Yes.
industry. It's very niche, tight knit.
Yes. Yes. I think there's probably a lot of industries that are kind of like that. Like if you're in like
Yeah,
B2B, SaaS kind of companies,
definitely.
everybody's kind of talking to everybody all the
Yeah.
time, right? So, how many pilot customers like did you start with? Because I think that especially like B2B, it's like you never know. Should I do five? Should I do
Yeah.
10? Should I just do one? Just to kind of give a little reference to people who may be thinking about
Yeah, I
this.
think pilot is such a general term. Like we had a lot of different like relationships with different people and I think,
Mhm.
some were formally called pilots, some were a little bit more informal and it
Mhm.
really is like you're just trying to get feedback on what is working and what's not working
Yeah.
too. And I think once you start to hear a couple times the same things, like
Mhm.
you're onto something or which ways to steer away from. And I would say there's not really
Yeah.
like a good number. It totally depends on your industry. It totally depends on like what you're building. But I would say when
Mhm.
you start to feel as a founder and like your gut and your intuition, like that this is I'm onto something or I'm hearing the same things
Mhm.
over and over. Maybe I need to pivot or maybe I need to continue down this
Mhm.
path, whatever outcome it may drive. I think that's like when you really feel like, okay, we're ready to like go to market if that's what the next phase you want to
Mhm.
call it.
Yeah, absolutely. Um, yeah, I think doubling down on the things that you're hearing over and over is in terms of like, this is working. So it's like, okay, how can we keep refining that piece of the
Yeah.
solution? And then, of course, the things you're hearing that is just like, hey, this, we don't need this, or this isn't really
Yeah.
helping to also kill that, right? Like, because sometimes you feel like you spent so much time on it. It's hard to also kind of just say, okay, we're not going down
Right,
that
right.
path.
But
So
sometimes
you kind of get
yeah, but
emotionally
sometimes, like, that
attached.
feedback may just be that one person or those, like, 3 or 4
Right.
people and, like, broader industry, like, it
Right.
might just be the way that they solve that problem today is super
Yeah.
nuanced, so, yeah, you kinda have to, like, take it all with a grain of salt,
Yeah. Or you table
yeah,
it and you say, we'll come back
yeah.
to that later, see if it's being requested. So how did you define some successes, right? What helped you to kind of say, okay, we're moving forward in the right direction. Because I know when you're first building, and of course you don't have revenue, you don't have your financials to look at, to say, this is what's successful,
Yeah,
right? What are some other things that can help you to say, okay, I am making
yeah.
progress, even if it doesn't feel like it?
I totally struggled with that because, in those early days, when we weren't making revenue, like we were, it just felt like we were spinning our wheels and not getting anywhere. Um,
Yeah.
I struggled with that. I was like, this is not, business. But I think like there are so many other like factors that you can measure, like how many calls did you have with customers?
Hmm.
How many calls, how many meetings, how many did that lead to a second meeting or third meeting? And then you can kind of like start to see like where are things falling off or where are like things that I need to focus on. It's really hard to do KPIs that early on. I would say like a
Yeah.
lot of it was like gut intuition kind of things, which when you
Yeah.
have that like negative frame, it's really hard to like see out of that. And so, yeah, I know we've talked about this a lot, but
Yes.
I, relied on coaching a lot to get through and try and like take a step out of that and understand, okay, like revenue is not the only metric right now at this point and there
Mhm.
are other ways to show that there is progress being made. But yeah,
Yeah. No, I
it was
know
really
it's really hard. Yeah, and in the beginning, because you don't have much going on and everything kind of feels jumbled, right? Like you're like, what should I
Yeah.
focus on? What am I doing today? So really kind of stepping back to say, okay, let's come back to our key focuses, our customer, our product,
Yeah.
right? Like what's progressing there? Are we kind of hitting some of the milestones we set for
Mhm.
ourselves? Like if it's talking to 10 customers this week, did we do that,
Yeah.
right? So sometimes it's things that feel small, but those are going to become your initial customers, right? So you got to keep pushing forward until you hear that yes, let's
Yeah.
go, you have the green light.
Totally.
Right?
Totally.
So any other feedback or advice for founders, especially things outside of maybe just building, right? That helps you. Like I know I talk to founders a lot about like how can they be most productive and keep going past some of these inner dialogues that might come in, but outside of the work, like making sure you have certain routines that have helped you or just mindsets that have helped you keep
I'm
going.
definitely a work in progress for all of that. I would say probably like one of my biggest like focuses or focus areas for 2025 was think about like your energy and how to run with it. So like the days that
Hmm.
you're super productive and feeling really great and very energized, like keep going. Like go past 5, go past
Hmm.
7, go past 9, like keep going. But on the days where you're just can't, like, don't sit at your desk forcing yourself to do that. Because I think, one of
Yeah.
the key things of being a founder and entrepreneur is like, you need to tap into this creative side. You need this ability to problem solve and like think clearly. And if
Hmm.
you're just forcing yourself to put in specific hours from specific times of the day, you drain
Hmm.
yourself really quickly. I think coming from corporate America, like I was very like, okay, I'm going to get to my desk and I'm going to work, from 8 to 7 or 8 to 6, like depending on what
Hmm.
it was. And like, then there were days where I'm like, I'm just sitting here. I'm like not active right now. And it's just draining my
Yeah.
energy versus like, let me go
Yeah.
take a walk. Let me go do something to reset. I think
Hmm.
that's critical because it's a marathon. Like you're going to be doing this for a
Yes.
long time. And like, you need to take care of yourself. And I'm still figuring out ways to do that, but I think, at least you can every day you can try something new.
Yeah. No, I think that's a really, really great perspective. Because you're right, every day is not the same.
Yeah,
Your energy levels different, and also initially the amount of work you have is
totally.
different, right? There's only so much you can do to move things forward, and it can be frustrating to kind of fill your day with I don't know nothing or just busy
Yeah.
work. So instead, it's like how can I get more creative? And as we know, creativity comes from when you're doing the dishes or
Right.
walking or
Yeah.
just nothing, right? Like that's when your brain starts making all these different connections. So you definitely want to take advantage of that while you
Mhm.
can, because before you know it, your days will be
Yeah.
filled with a lot of work.
Totally. One of my I like love Sarah Blakely, the founder and CEO of Spanx. And so
Yes.
one of the things like I know she does, like drives like her commute because that's
Yes.
her way to like kind of think about things and problem solve. She lives like 2 minutes
Hmm.
from the headquarters, or back when she was the CEO, like
Yeah.
lived 2 minutes from the headquarters, but she'd
Yep.
drive for like 30 minutes because she's like, I need that time. So I think that's funny.
Yeah.
Yeah, she's got to figure out like where your time is.
Definitely. I also love Sarah Blakely, and I know the other thing she talks about is like she has like notebooks, just
Yeah.
random ideas. She's just like constantly
Yeah.
jotting down, and she's like, most of them I'm not going to use, and maybe are not helpful, but a lot them can be,
Yeah,
right?
and just
So it's
having
like as soon as you kind of have
yeah,
that, you
having that
want to.
thought process throughout the day of, like, living your life, it's great.
Yes. So do you have a system like that too for when ideas kind of start to spark a little
Yeah,
bit?
I use the Notes app. I'm, like, a dedicated Apple Notes user, and I have, like, a whole section of, like, inspiration, and I use it a little
Mm.
bit more for, like, things like when someone says something or I read an inspirational, like, note, I'll put it in there,
Hmm.
of just, like
Yeah.
yeah, from a variety of, like, productivity hacks, but also, like, be, like helpful
Yeah.
to yourself.
Yeah. Like be kind
Yeah.
to yourself.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. No, I think those things help a lot. And so when you're just kind of having one of those days, you just go there and go, okay, I have new thoughts now. Okay, so let's talk a little bit about like team and culture and execution, right? I know you just hired your first engineer, CTO. Um, but how do you think about, because I know you've grown teams before as well, how do you think about the hiring process and, what you would look for to bring someone on to your team?
For me, in all of the roles that I've been in, I've always found people who are early in their career and hungry and motivated, and I'm willing to teach knowledge. And I think that is a different approach than other managers and leaders have. I, feel very strongly about supporting people throughout their career journey. And so, there I think there's like incredible people who are early on in their careers who just want to like get some experience and are willing to do different types of tasks and kind of work in this chaotic like environment, especially in the startup world. I've tapped into a lot of different people who are early on in their careers who have helped me in different like fractional ways as well. So even before a full-time hire, we can leverage, different marketing advice or product advice and help them learn things that they are interested in learning, but maybe couldn't get a full time role in just yet. And so that's something I've always felt strongly about. I think I've also like mentorship has been an important part of my career. And so I am consistently mentoring other either startup founders, other undergraduates, other people that, need help along the journey and feel very strongly about
Yeah,
that.
I love that. I mean, I think sometimes when you're young in your career, you really don't know like where to go or what to do, and especially I think the job market is like a little weird right now anyway for
Yeah.
new grads. So I think it's great that you see the potential there and help kind of bring on people that otherwise may not have gotten experience because of where we currently are.
Yeah, like we have an
So
intern who's undergrad right now, and like, she came in as like a product intern. Now she's kind of helping with like customer onboarding, communications, and learning like different marketing aspects too. So like, it was something she was interested in and wanted to get some exposure on, and so we put some projects together for her, and I think that's super important to be able to support that.
that is really cool. Especially like, you know, when you're at a startup, you can just say, I'm interested in that.
Yeah,
Let me just go learn that, because nobody
great.
knows it
Like,
at
great,
this
go
firm,
ahead.
right?
Here you
Like,
go.
yeah, so that's great. Great for you as well. So as you look ahead to next couple of years, what are some things you want to, or what do you see happening for your company, and how do you want to help hospitals along the way during that time, or just healthcare in general?
Yeah, so we at Efficiency, we feel very strongly on helping hospital supply chain teams work more efficiently and effectively together. There are a lot of tasks in the healthcare supply chain that are very manual, utilizing spreadsheets, emails, etc. And so we are automating workflows in a lot of different areas. So I think as we grow and expand, we'll continue to expand that scope within the supply chain world. But I feel really strongly that we are an affordable and accessible technology. So we are, passionate about making sure that budget does not impact the ability to acquire our technology.
Amazing. So we'll end with one question that I always ask founders and leaders is, what is one recommendation you have, whether it's a book, podcast? I know you mentioned mentoring and coaching already, but just like one resource that has kind of stayed with you and has helped you along your career and also building your company.
Yeah, so I know I looked this up right before we chatted. The
Yeah.
book is called The Secret by Rhonda Byrne, and so it's very I you can read it in like literally a couple hours. It's a very good book. I don't totally
Yeah.
buy into all of the like stuff that's in there, but I think the overall
Uh-huh.
concept of just energy and like the energy that you put out into the world also affects your mindset. So if you are thinking
Hmm.
positively and putting positive energy out in the world, you will think positively and you will also like take bigger risks and feel more confident in your outcomes. And I love that concept. I think, I try and every day think about that of like, what is, the energy that we're putting out into the world and how are we helping our customers? How am I showing up as a founder and leader of the company? And like, how can we impact this industry positively?
That is amazing. And yeah, I mean, I think when you think positively, right, the word that came up for me was like abundance, right? Like you have an abundance of
Yeah.
opportunity. Whereas like if you're kind of more closed off or you think it's not possible, then you also miss opportunities, right? Because you're looking for it to not be
Yeah.
possible.
And the cool thing is like you
Yeah.
can start over halfway through the day, right? Like if you have a bad morning,
Yeah.
like it's okay. Like turn it around, like go for a
Yeah.
walk, go for a
Yeah.
run, something like to reset.
Yes, definitely, definitely. No, I think those things are very important. And like you said, this is a marathon of you building a company, and hopefully your company is well around here in 20 plus years as well. So if you think from that time frame, right, today's just one day, and you have to kind of use it the best you can, and then just take a moment to reset if things are not going
Absolutely.
perfectly. And I don't know, it can completely change your mood
Yeah.
too.
Yeah.
So I love that perspective. Thank you so much for taking the time to share all of your insights, your journey, and your perspectives. I learned a lot about you. I know we've talked many times, but I always feel like in these interviews I learn a lot
Yeah.
more. So I always love it because I'm like, oh, I didn't know Sarah did that. So that's really cool. But I really appreciate it, and I am always like cheerleader mode, like for your company. I think you're doing something so
Thank you.
amazing, and anything that helps our healthcare systems, I'm always a pro for.
Yeah.
So
Yeah. No, thank you. Yeah. Thanks for having me. This was fun.
thank you for joining us on the Little Pursuits podcast. Please follow, subscribe, and share this with one builder who needs it.